and entrepreneur straight out of New York City, Michael Chernow. What's cracking?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Creatures of Habit podcast. Today, I have a guest that has truly inspired me, I would say, beyond anybody else in the world of hospitality. I grew up in New York City. One of the first restaurants that I went to where I was like, oh my gosh, this is what a restaurant is supposed to be. One of the first books that I read on hospitality that really cemented my passion for the business, setting the table. That first restaurant was Union Square Cafe for me when I was probably, 16 or 17 years old. Danny Meyer is a legend. Danny Meyer really has paved the way for so many people in the world of hospitality over the years. And I'm so excited to have him on the Creatures of Habit podcast. Danny, welcome.
Michael, that was incredibly generous. Thank you. And right back at you.
Well, it's so true. And you really, I think your nature as a human being makes you so unique in the world of hospitality. You are just gentle in nature and carry a leadership style that is hard to see past, because you lead with your heart, and it's something that you've preached for a very long time in an industry that doesn't necessarily, or for many years did not actually go that way. So you opened up so many avenues for people like me who really led with or wanted to learn how to lead with their heart, even coming up in a place where, the customer is always first. And you really defied that. And so it's exciting for me to have you here. This podcast is about habit. My habits for years coming up in the world of restaurants, in the world of the night, almost killed me. And I made a pivotal moment. I made a pivotal change in my life in my early 20s to replace all of my bad habits with good ones, and was able to sustain a life in the world of hospitality throughout that whole change, going from a bit of an addict to sober, living in recovery now for a long time. And so I really believe in habits. And, I'd like to focus this conversation on habits in potentially hospitality, because there's a lot of people that listen to this podcast that have followed along my journey from hospitality. So morning routine is a big deal for me. Morning routine is a very, very big deal for me. I believe we pour a foundation in the beginning of our day every day. And, I would love to hear what your morning routine looks like.
It really depends on the morning, but every morning when I wake up, I read, and I generally read for half an hour, something like that. Mostly news, sometimes I go through emails. At Union Square Hospitality Group, every night we get a full report from the maitre d' of each restaurant on how that night's service went. So I'm trying to create the habit of not reading them all late at night, but instead reading them first thing in the morning. And I love to catch up on how the night went at all of our restaurants. And I love catching up on a couple news stories. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is that 3 mornings a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I go to the gym where I have a trainer, which if I didn't have a trainer, I might not go to the gym 3 days a week. I get to the office feeling ready to tackle the day on those 3 days. On the other 2 days, I generally have very early morning meetings with people on our team who can meet early in the morning. So generally like 8 or 8:30, something like that. And then on my weekend mornings, I like to take 2 hours to read and catch up on stuff, because invariably there's a backlog of people to correspond with, and especially on Sunday, I love the news. I spend a lot of time with the news, and then I usually get exercise in the late morning on the weekends, running, walking, whatever. depending on the weather. Hiking, love to hike.
When I read your book, it clearly defined that you had a number of restaurants in a relatively close proximity to each other, in that sort of Union Square, Gramercy area, and this was before you had like all the restaurants that you have now under the Union Square hospitality umbrella. But I remember reading that you would walk every morning from restaurant to restaurant, and you would greet all of the staff members at those restaurants. You'd say hello to everybody. You'd look them in the eye. You'd say hello. You'd like genuinely care about what they said in response to your "How are you doing?" And that made such an impact on me. Where do you think that came from? Where do you think that genuine interest in people came from?
I feel like it's somewhat selfish. It's the same reason I give hugs, because I want to get one back. And when was the last time you gave someone a hug and didn't get one back? Right. And I feel like one of the lessons I learned very early in my career, this was from a really great restaurateur who's now since retired, Alex von Bitter, who used to be one of the two partners at the Four Seasons. And Alex, we were talking about this very thing, Michael, and he said, "You obviously understand something that I learned a long time ago." And I said, "What's that?" And he said that people will take exactly as much interest in you as they believe you're taking in them, no more and no less. And so when I said it's selfish, or self-interest, I should say, I learned early on, it's in my self-interest for the people on our team to care about their work. And why should they care about their work if their perception is that I don't care about them? So I do that to this day, not in the morning any longer, but whenever I go to any of our restaurants to visit them, the general manager knows that they have a job, and their job is to give me, we call them dots to connect. And they give me dots on people on the team, generally 3 to 5 people. I can't do more than that, or it doesn't feel genuine. But they'll give me dots on 3 to 5 people who have done things or performed in ways that go over and beyond. And then what I'll do is, in fact, I just did it a couple nights ago at Gramercy Tavern. I'll go up to the person and I'll say, I understand from fill in the blank, whoever it is, that you've been doing a remarkable job of wine sales, or whatever the topic may be. And what happens at that point is that I'm actually elevating their leader's leadership, because I didn't come in disingenuously and say, "Hey, congratulations for doing such a great job of selling wine." They know I haven't been at the restaurant for the last 5 nights, seeing them do that. But by saying, "William says you're doing a remarkable job of selling wine," and everybody's raving about it, everybody wins. They get to hear from the big guy, and they know that it was important enough for their boss to tell me. And so I really try to do that as much as I can. And then, for the other 20 or 30 people who I come in contact with, of course, I look them in the eye and, give them a fist bump or whatever. And by the way, I would never say, "How are you?" because I'm not going to get a genuine answer from someone. I would say, "Good to see you," or, something like that. But I'm not big on "how's everything." I hate that expression.
That's
when
actually,
someone asks me when someone asks me how's everything, I go, "I don't think you really want to know." Some things are really good. Enough things are really good, but everything, I can't even get my arms around that.
Right. You make that clear in your book. You definitely don't like walking up to a guest and asking how's everything going.
One big mistake I made with a guest very early in my career, I was working the front door of Union Square Cafe, and these folks were on their way out the door, and I said, "Thank you so much. It was really nice having you." And the guy turned around without smiling, and he said, "Yeah, it was nice to be had." And I don't think he meant it in the positive sense of the word either.
Even the fact that I say guest is, I mean, I'm trying not to make this let me just tell Danny Meyer how awesome he is party.
My family is in the next room, and they will counter everything back. So you want to know
but
the
it's
truth.
true. It's true. You know, and interestingly, I've like actually had arguments with business partners and other people that have worked with me along the way in my career in the restaurant space, where it's not a customer conversation. You know, customers buy cars. Customers, sign up for insurance plans. Customers don't walk into restaurants if you really want them to feel wanted and appreciated and loved, right?
Yeah, obviously, I think, I'm with you on that. In fact, they are customers because they pay for a service that we provide. But that's at the very base level. That's not why we do what we do. We don't, if someone were to say, what do you do for a living? I wouldn't say I sell food or I sell glasses of wine, which is a customer, right? You give me money, I give you food. That's a transaction. But we are in business, and I know you are as well, as a hospitality transaction. And in a hospitality transaction, you need to have a host and a guest. And so by using that, I think language is really, really powerful. And so if you want someone to feel like there is heart and soul behind that actual customer transaction, by calling them a guest, it implies that there's a home and that there's a host, someone whose job it is to make them feel welcome. That's not something I feel in most customer situations.
Is there a habit that, you might not even think of it as a habit, but is there something that you do intentionally outside of genuinely connecting with your team? Are there any things that you do in order to really make the team the priority in your business? Are there any activities or actions that you take that the listener here could potentially implement into their businesses or their lives that you believe the team feels special for?
I think there are. The challenge for me with your question is when you said that I intentionally do. I think a lot of this has just become intuitive over the years, but it really gets back to trying to create a sense of belonging. I believe that the greatest human longing is the longing to belong to something. And I think that the thing that we first belong to as people is our family. And then after that, we find other things to belong to. It could be, it could be your favorite sports team. It could be a place of religion. It could be a political party. It could be your fraternity or sorority. It could be the college you went to, whatever. You feel like you belong. I think in the past handful of years, a lot of these things to which people used to belong, clubs, social clubs, etc., have diminished to a degree. And therefore, I think the place you work is a really important place to belong. And so I am intentional in my desire that while people understand that this is not a family, kind of like what I was just saying about customer, at the core base, you provide work and you get a paycheck, but that's not belonging. And so what I really hope to do is to elevate the purpose of why we exist. Like, why do we all come to work? And we spend a lot of time using language to talk about that, because I think language is the mortar between the bricks that build culture. And so by having a common language in your family, I'm sure you had a common language. You probably had a nickname, Michael, when you family. And when you heard that nickname, everyone in your family knew exactly who they were talking about. But I bet 10 other families didn't know that nickname. And therefore, they were, in addition to a shorthanded way of conveying, we're talking to Michael right now, they also created a sense of belonging. We belong to this group because we all speak this language. So I am intentional about speaking in a common language. And so, for example, we have 6 expected behaviors of the people on our team. And all of those behaviors ladder up to language that I'd written about in setting the table. They all know exactly what it means. If I say center the salt shaker, they know what that means. If I say write a great next chapter, they know what that means. If I say err on the side of generosity and have a charitable assumption, they know exactly what that means. I am very intentional about the language we use. And I think that not only is it a way to advance culture, but it's also a way to advance
culture. You know, I've said many times, business without culture is dead, in my opinion. I think culture, and not everybody thinks this way, for sure. Culture could be a double-edged sword, right? It can have a really, really terrible culture that some would consider potentially not having any culture. And then there are, of course, really wonderful cultures. If you had to just define culture, how would you define culture?
Oh, it's such a good question. And it's so important because the word gets used all the time. I define culture in a handful of ways. The first thing, and by the way, earlier in my career, when I say earlier, like I only had one restaurant, Union Square Cafe, for the first decade of my career. And that was fine with me. And then when Gramercy Tavern came along, and then 4 years after that, 11 Madison Park and Tabla, increasingly, wherever I was not at the other restaurants. And I would walk back and forth between the restaurants. And I started to hear some of the veteran team members in each restaurant saying, it doesn't feel the same anymore. The culture's not what it used to be. And that was like the worst thing you could say to me. I felt like, Danny, you're failing. You never should have expanded. Why did you do this? You're ruining everything. Well, guess what? I learned over many years that I should have just said, thank you. You're damn right the culture's changing. Culture, as I define it, is the way we do things around here. And there's no way culture can or should be maintained. It is like a shark. It's either moving forward or it's going to die. The thing that should never change are your values and your expected behaviors. Those things should never change. So if somebody had said, people around here have stopped caring about, I'll use the most obvious thing, hospitality. I'd say, well, then I'm quitting. Here's the keys to the store. Yeah, it's just not worth it at that point. But culture, so I would define culture two ways. Number one, it's the way we do things around here. It's that simple. But then I've actually come up with a little mathematical equation, which is that culture is the sum of all of your organization's expected behaviors that you celebrate, minus all of the unwanted behaviors that you tolerate. And that was a really important aha moment for me because I'm much, much better at catching people doing things right than I am at exiting people who either can't do it right or who won't do it, whose attitude won't do it right. And I'm really good at making excuses because we've all had the amazing cook without whom you couldn't get through service, except the cook is horrible for your culture. I learned the hard way in my earlier part of my career that I was really good at making excuses. Well, we'll never find a cook who's that good, so we're just going to tolerate all the stuff. Well, guess what? It's undermining our culture, but it's also undermining my credibility because why would I put up with that if I really meant that I cared about these behaviors? Or we've also seen the amazing human being who everybody loves working with, but they just can't cut it. They're just not good at what they do. And you've tried to teach them and tried to teach, but you're afraid to show them the door because everybody loves them. That's why I came up with that mathematical equation, if you will, is that it's one thing to promote the culture carriers, but equally you have to exit the people who are undermining the culture.
I think that's such an important piece of the puzzle, and for people like you and I who tend to want to congratulate more so than tell people they suck.
And there's something in between there, which is coaching people.
Right. Like, I mean, I think the little things that I think are so important are things that people really, really overlook without even understanding how much impact they can have, like walking past the dish pit and then stopping 15 steps after you've passed the dish pit, turning around, walking over to the dishwashers and just looking at them and saying something like, thank you. That took maybe, I don't know, 30 seconds of your time to literally elevate the whole entire day, potentially week of that group of people, that the owner of the business just stopped and looked at us and said, thank you.
Yeah. And name one person who works harder with less credit than the dishwasher, by the way, or the pot washer. You're absolutely right about that. They appreciate being seen and appreciated.
Would you put culture as the most important component to your success?
Yes. There's no question about it. Now, earlier we were talking about culture. If I define culture as the way we do things around here, right? You don't have to, everyone has a culture. You don't have to work to have a culture. Unless you have no habits whatsoever and you do every single thing differently every single day, you have a culture. The question is twofold. Is it an intentional culture? And is the intention that it uplifts people? That's where the hard work comes in. So, my next door neighbors when I was growing up in St. Louis, they had a culture. I would be over there, playing baseball or whatever it was we were doing. And the dad would screech into the driveway every afternoon at 5:11 and walk inside, make himself a cocktail. And there would be a conversation about who did or didn't do their homework. And, you shouldn't be out playing baseball and all. And, and then they were getting their food ready for dinner. That was their culture. And then there was an argument. That's how they did things. They didn't have to work at it. Now, in business, and when you say, do I think it's the most important thing? I think intentionally having the habit of focusing on what do we want that culture to be? What is our intention? And then fueling it every single day. That is, there's no question in my mind that has been a secret, or the secret, because, once upon a time, you were either making the best meatballs in town or the only meatballs in town. But a whole lot of people try to copy your meatballs. I remember that very, very well. And yet there was an uplifting feeling when you walked into the meatball shop. And that didn't just happen by accident. That was your probably, or somebody's intentional stoking the flames of what do we want this culture to be, and how do we make sure it's uplifting?
If there's somebody listening here and they are struggling to change the culture in their organization or their business, and because I identify so much with that cook that is just an absolute animal on the line and just pumps food out and is just like it's perfect every time and it moves the kitchen along, but hates everybody around them or just really sends out that really negative energy that nobody feels.
And we call that skunking. And when a skunk sprays something that's either angry or afraid of, the rest of us within 2 miles get to smell it, whether we want to or not. And we all assume that the skunk must be right next to us, or we must assume that we were the thing that frightened them or made them angry. And that cook skunks and the whole restaurant smells like it.
What kind of advice can you give someone who's listening, and whether they're in the food business or any industry, where they feel like there's a piece of the puzzle that's missing in the culture component? How can someone take action to change?
So the first thing I would do is to say, if you could wave a magic wand or draw a picture or whatever you like to do, what is the ideal way that you want people to do things around here? And I take it a step further, because I think in business, restaurants, whatever, it's not the ones that outperform that win. It's the ones that outbehave that win. And so I would ask myself, how do I want people to do things around here? How do I want people to behave around here? And I wouldn't come up with more than 5 things that matter to you the most, but I put them down on paper. And everyone's different. There's not a right or wrong. It could be, my top three things are punctuality, cleanliness, and attention to detail. I'm just giving you an example. It could be anything, but I would absolutely ask myself, how do I want things done around here? Put words to it that connect to behaviors. They're not values. They're actually, they should be things that I could go up to you and say, you were late today. Remember, one of our expected behaviors is punctuality. You didn't do that today, right? A behavior is something that you can actually hold up a mirror. And then I would convey that to everybody. And I'd say, I've been doing a lot of soul searching, and we have some really good days around here. Some days don't feel as good, but I want to be much more intentional so we have a whole lot more great days. And so I asked myself to define what a great day feels like and looks like. I'm talking about the work, how does it feel to come to work? And what does a great day feel like and look like? And so I challenged myself to come up with, a handful of things, behaviors that are always present when it feels really good around here. And here they are. And from this moment on, I'm going to hold myself accountable for these things, and I'm going to hold you accountable. Now, when you took this job in the first place, I didn't have this stuff. And so you may say to yourself, hey, when I got on that airplane, it was headed towards Miami. Now you just told me it's headed towards Tampa. I didn't want to go to Tampa. So if you're not excited about signing up for these behaviors, these expected behaviors that are going to fuel our culture, you're not bad for that, but I'd get off the airplane right now if I were you, because this is how it's going to be from now on. And I'll repeat, I'll start by holding myself accountable. And if any of you at any point thinks that I'm not upholding these behaviors, I really want to hear about it. I invite you to tell me. And likewise, you can expect that I'll do the same for you. That's what I would do.
Danny, I really appreciate you being here. I always finish the podcast with one last question, and you've done so much, and you've inspired so many people. Why do you do it? Why do you continue to do it? What is it?
There's two reasons, Michael. Number one is that I love this challenge of exactly what we've been talking about, which is it possible to scale culture? In our industry, if someone were to say, what historic figure in our industry did the best job at scaling systems, I'd say that's probably Ray Kroc from McDonald's. You could get French fries in any McDonald's anywhere on the globe, and they're going to taste exactly the same. I don't think Ray Kroc spent a lot of time thinking about a system for scaling how it feels to work, or a system for how it feels to dine at McDonald's. I just don't think that was important to him. Well, I'm not saying we're anywhere close to being there, but I love the idea of asking myself on every single day, is it possible to scale human emotion, to scale a feeling, the feeling of hospitality? So that really gets me excited. I'm watching it happen at Shake Shack, where there's now over 400 Shake Shacks across the globe in, I think, 18 different countries at this point. And I'd like to believe and feel that in addition to consistent food quality, maybe not as consistent as McDonald's, but in addition to consistent food quality, that there's a consistent human energy that you would feel that feels different if you go into any Shake Shack, whether it's in the Middle East or Singapore or Turkey or London, wherever it is. I'd like to think that we're doing that. And the other thing, if I'm just as introspective as possible, is to this day, I still have a wee bit of an imposter complex. And I believe that everything that we may have done yesterday was a fluke. And so I am also motivated each day to come back and say, well, let me go prove that I can do that and even more. And that, you do this as an athlete, you do this as a teacher. If I were a mountain climber, it would be akin to, all right, I just did that one. Now let me find a slightly higher peak. I've learned to love the feeling of incompetence and that's how I've kind of trained myself to stop feeling bad about being an imposter. I'm not an imposter, I'm myself, but the little piece of me every single day that feels incompetent, means I'm growing because I'm taking on a new challenge that I've never done before. So of course I'm incompetent at it. And I really like that feeling.
Danny, you've been such an inspiration for me. You really have, since the beginning of my clear vision in life at the wee age of 23 or 24 years old. You've made a very big impact on my life and my career, and it's so important to me that you know that, and you've done that for many, many, many others. So I can't thank you enough for taking the time with me today on the Creatures of Habit podcast. I've taken a little break from the restaurant space, and I'm bringing all the things that I've learned in hospitality and the way to treat human beings into another industry, in the world of wellness. But it's so translatable. If you're listening and you're feeling a little lost and you're trying to figure something out, go get a job at one of Danny Meyer's restaurants.
Come one, come all.
Walk into a Shake
Come one,
Shack.
come all.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you so much. Really appreciate
Michael,
it.
thank you for inviting me, and really congratulations for all you've contributed to our industry as well. Even though you're now not in it, you're still about hospitality. You're still about helping people feel better.
I'll be back. Thanks, Danny.